What's good, everyone? Welcome to the complete attachment guide for Rainbow Six Siege X. If you're watching this over on YouTube, this is the portion of the guide that explains all my decisions and the processes that I went through to make them. The other portion in question is the document that you can find in the description of this video or over on my Reddit, where I thoroughly outline my options for each weapon on each operator. Now, simply I could just tell you about all of my attachments for each weapon, but there is a lot of deeper reasoning that goes into these decisions that might help you decide whether you want to match my list or just do your own thing. Attachments in this game are complicated, and the way you kit your weapon should benefit your playstyle. However, because I have undiagnosed autism, I took a week to thoroughly test every single weapon's recoil pattern and damage values in order to deduce the best possible attachments for every single weapon in the game. Up first, let's talk about optics. Optics in Siege have arguably been the most difficult balancing lever for the devs since the game launched back in 2015. Optics alone have faced more scrutiny than possibly any other feature in the game. So of course I gave it its own section. In Siege X, optics are split into 4 categories from lowest zoom to highest. We have the iron sights, the non-magnified or the 1x, the magnified or the 2.5x, and the telescopic or the 3.5x. While the vast majority of players would encourage you to use the magnified sights wherever available, there are some drawbacks that you should be aware of. Magnified sights allow for better visibility of your target by making their model larger on your screen, trading for reduced ADS speed on paper. In actuality, however, that reduced ADS speed is compounded by reduced peripheral visibility and some worse visual recoil. Zooming in on your screen has the effect of cutting off the outer portions of your field of view, and while magnified sights have no direct effect on the recoil of the weapon, the zoom effect will actually make each shot climb higher on your screen than if non-magnified. This basically forces you to pull down a little harder on your mouse or your sticks to compensate. These are always factors to keep in mind when deciding how to kit each weapon out to your playstyle with each operator. When it comes to the options within each category of sight, there are 3 main factors to every single optics model that you should keep in mind. First, the sight housing, which is this outer portion of the sight. The sight picture, which is the amount of space the glass takes up inside the sight. And finally, the sight reticle, which is what you actually use to aim. Some sight housings are large and abrasive, which is bad because it takes up more room in your peripheral vision than other sights do. When choosing a good sight, you want a sight housing that is thin and only takes up space that is negligible. The sight picture is important as well, as large sight pictures can assist you in knowing exactly how far you have to flick in order to align your reticle with a target. For example, if a target is outside of your sight picture, it might be harder to gauge how far you have to adjust your reticle to be on target. The larger the sight picture, the better. Finally, the reticle. Reticles are mostly personal preference, but a reticle that does not obscure or confuse your vision is best. Over or under complicated reticles can give you too much or too little information about your sight placement. While a lot of sight options are personal preference, there are sights that fit all of these qualifications better than others. The previous king of the 1x world was the Hollow A, and it was mostly due to its very, very small center dot, which got changed about a year or so ago. As you can see now, the sight has a very bulky housing, a small sight picture with an admittedly decent reticle. Overall, this sight is really no longer one that I would use regularly. The sight that by a decent margin fits all of these categories best is the Hollow B, which has a slim housing, a large sight picture, and a reticle that is only slightly worse than some of the other options. On the magnified side, all of these sights have their own niches. The magnified A is great for quicker operators that rely on fast reaction times and good peripheral vision, but its reticle is so bulky that it might be a hindrance to long-range engagements or when you're holding tight angles. The Magnified B is the exact opposite, with a fantastic reticle, huge sight picture, but little to no peripheral view. This sight will force you to tunnel vision, and it's the best for slow operators who will be holding angles, notably on all of the DMRs on defense. The Magnified C has a slim housing, a decent sight picture, but arguably the most confusing reticle in the game. This reticle alone holds the sight back, but if you can ignore most of it, it is still a viable option that sits between the extremes of the other two. These choices are reinforced by your playstyle with each weapon. For me, automatic weapons like Ace's AK-12, I use the Magnified A on because I know I'm going to be pushing off of his utility, whereas on a Roni's DMR, I'm going to be using the Magnified B so I can hold pixels and body shot my enemies. Just like the optics mentioned before, there is a lot more to muzzle attachments than what is explicitly stated in their description. This game actually takes into account the cartridge your weapon is firing, whether it be a pistol caliber like 9mm or a rifle caliber like .308. And this actually affects our choice of muzzle attachment for how it affects both the first shot recoil and the muzzle flash. For example, the flash hider is not only regarded as the best muzzle attachment in the game due to its reduction of vertical recoil, its namesake is not hyperbole. The flash hider improves your visibility by removing the muzzle flash from your own weapon. However, this removal of the muzzle flash is only relevant on weapons with rifle class calibers, like the majority of assault rifles in the game. This makes attachments like the extended barrel and the compensator, attachments that do not affect muzzle flash, more viable on smaller caliber weapons like SMGs. Even if a rifle's recoil pattern may look like it requires the compensator, the muzzle flash alone might make the flash hider a more viable option. You will see how this affects my weapon by weapon choices further down. So moving down one by one the list of muzzle attachments, the flash hider states that it will reduce your overall vertical recoil. While this statement is very true, the way in which this effect is coded into the game actually has a small negative impact on your horizontal recoil. This attachment slightly reduces the space between each shot, overall reducing the total climb of the spray. Effectively, the recoil pattern is squished, which pushes the horizontal pattern wider. This isn't really a massive downside, while the flash hider's positive effects are still fantastic. As I mentioned earlier, it completely removes the muzzle flash on ARs and LMGs. This massively improves your visibility, as in essence you're no longer being flashed in millisecond long intervals. The compensator is the polar opposite to the flash hider, trading unchanged vertical recoil for improved horizontal control. This is most effective on SMGs that have minimal vertical pull, but bouncy recoil patterns that are unpredictable for the average player. The compensator has no effect on the visual muzzle flash for higher caliber weapons, which is honestly its biggest downside for ARs. There are many weapons that could use this extra horizontal control on attack, but it remains much easier to recommend for SMGs than ARs. The muzzle brake states that it reduces the kick of single shot firing, which at a glance seems to be only effective for DMRs. However, this option also has the hidden effect of reducing your weapon's zeroing time, which is the amount of time it takes for your weapon to return to a stable state after firing. While this option is the go-to on DMRs, it also has a place among the ARs. See, most weapons in Siege have a first shot recoil that is higher than the rest of the pattern. The muzzle brake completely eliminates this issue, not only making small bursts more accurate and easier to control overall, but in turn makes it much easier to land reaction shots on unknown foes. The muzzle brake also has an effect on the muzzle flash, pushing it into your peripheral instead of your sight picture. While this benefit isn't as good as the flash hider or the suppressor, which completely removes the muzzle flash, it is better than the compensator and the extended barrel. The suppressor, as stated above, will remove your muzzle flash, just like the flash hider. It reduces the volume of your gunshots, but most importantly, it will remove the danger indicator that attackers receive when being shot from a certain direction. On some weapons, the suppressor has a massive physical model on your weapon, which rarely can reveal your location to the enemy before you even swing a corner. This is only really an issue on a handful of weapons in the game, and the only real downside of running a suppressor is that you aren't running any recoil mitigation in the muzzle category, which on certain weapons can be a death sentence. While the suppressor is a little niche, it shines very brightly within the kit of certain operators that benefit from being discreet. Finally, the extended barrel offers a 10% increase in total damage, which makes your weapons deadlier up close and more consistent at range. This option has the same downside as the suppressor, that is foregoing any recoil mitigation in the muzzle category. It also has the same visual downside as the compensator, that being having zero effect on the muzzle flash of the weapon. Without getting into the insane statistics required to understand where the extended barrel is best, there are a few damage numbers to remember. As a general rule, we don't want to take more than 3 shots to kill or down an operator, as the 4 to 5 shot range gives your opponent way too much time to react with a headshot. Our golden damage number for 1 and 2 health opponents, which comprise 76% of the roster, is 37 damage. The remaining 24% of the roster, our 3 health operators, can only take 3 shots at 42 damage before death. The maximum amount of health any operator can have at any given moment is 145, which would require us to have a damage rating above 48, which very few automatic weapons can break. All of this isn't even factoring in limb damage reduction values, range, or soft surface penetration values. And this is to say that both in ideal and non-ideal circumstances, the extended barrel serves to make your weapon more consistent in its body shot time to kill. Some weapons will benefit from this greatly, while on others it's virtually useless. Grips are by large the most straightforward attachments in the game. They pretty much do exactly as stated in their descriptions. The vertical grip reduces your recoil, the angle grip reduces your reload speed, and the horizontal grip increases your movement speed. While the increased recoil mitigation offered by the vertical grip is almost always the best option, there are a few niche weapons and playstyles that will require the other two. Weapons with longer than average reload speeds or small magazine sizes benefit from the angled grip the most, as they will be utilizing the reload speed buff more often. However, reloading faster is no trade for the assistance in accuracy that the vertical grip offers, so this option should only be chosen on specific weapons that have minimal recoil, like DMRs. The horizontal grip is the most beneficial among the LMG class, as this type of weapon passively applies a -10% movement speed debuff to its user. The horizontal grip halves this number to -5%. 3 health operators that are already slow as is should not be any slower due to their weapon choice, and we can treat that downside through the use of the horizontal grip. Yes, the to be or not to be of this game. To laser or not to laser? That is the question you're probably asking right about now. The laser sight got a big buff with the optics revamp in Operation Deadly Omen, changing it from reducing your hipfire spread to increasing your ADS speed. While this did change the popularity of this attachment, the ADS speeds were slowed down across the board in order to encourage players to pre-aim angles instead of sprinting into sight every round. The laser sight only reduces your ADS speed by literal fractions of a second, and if you get caught off guard, those fractions are not going to save you. In fact, the laser sight, which is visible to enemies, increases the chances in which you get caught off guard, as you may unknowingly be giving away your position to an unknown foe. Generally, I highly recommend against this attachment, other than in very unique scenarios that are typically operator specific. If you haven't already, go down and look at that document. I'm going to go through all the options one by one and explain the choices that I have. Dude, getting your audio to capture as intended is a fucking nightmare. Starting with the L85A2, this weapon currently only available on 2 operators, that being Sledge and Thatcher. On Sledge, I do run the suppressor just because when I play vertical with him, I want to be a little more discreet with where I'm shooting at enemies from. On Thatcher, however, you can definitely run the flash hider. That is the best option for the recoil for him. As you can see, it does have this leftward pull, which might make you want to use the compensator, but really it's so mild. It's completely controllable. Just pull down to the right. Yeah, you don't need any help. Moving on to the AR-33, by far the best attachments on this one are going to be the vertical grip and the flash hider. Again, it does kind of have a bouncy rightward pull, but there's like no space in between each of those shots. Best case for both Flores and Thatcher is going to be vertical and flash hider. Onto the G36C. I actually run the extended barrel on this weapon. As you can see, the recoil pattern is mostly vertical, and the extended barrel gets us to that 42 damage range, which is going to ensure a 3-shot body, which is actually perfect. Now, the R4C I actually run 2 different ways. On Ash, I run it with the vertical grip and the extended barrel, mostly because I'm using the one-times. The extended barrel gets us to 43 damage, which, yeah. No, it's actually past the 42 damage threshold, which again, 3-shotting defenders. On Ram, I do run the full recoil setup, which is going to be the flash hider vertical grip with the magnified sight. All right, for Thermite. Thermite and OSA's 556XI practically has no vertical recoil of its own, and it has this really, really annoying leftward pull. If you do end up putting on the flash hider, you're gonna notice it. It pulls pretty hard to the left, but on the compensator, you'll thank me later. Twitch is an interesting one because she's the only person with this gun right now. As you can see, I mean, that shot-by-shot recoil is crazy. Look at how much this thing jumps. If you're going to want to run recoil mitigation on this thing, flash hider or muzzle brake are your best options. But personally for Twitch, if I am running the F2, I'm running one-times and I'm running extended barrel. Extended barrel gets it over 40 damage. And yeah, if that recoil is going to be crazy, I'm not going to try to mitigate it. Onto the AK-12. This thing is an absolute monster. It does have that pretty scary rightward pull on it, but as you can see, it's not exactly very jumpy. It's quite consistent, meaning if you just pull down to the left, it's a laser beam. There's no real reason to give this thing anything other than the flash hider and the vertical grip. For the 5.52 Commando, recoil it's totally manageable. There's no reason to really run either of the grip options other than the vertical grip. I do run the extended barrel mostly because that damage rating gets us up to 48 damage. This is one of very, very few automatic weapons that can break that threshold. The threshold being 48, that is going to 3-shot every defender in the game, regardless of overhealth, from rook armor or overheals. For the ALDA, this thing has a decent damage rating of 42. It's only got one category for recoil mitigation, that being the muzzle. As you can see, no real reason to run the compensator on it. Run that flash hider. I don't recommend using this gun over any of the other options, both on IQ and WMI. For Jaeger's 416, recoil pattern is a little on the bouncy side, but personally, because I'm going to be up close and personal with this weapon, and the extended barrel gets over that 42 damage threshold, I'm running extended barrel vertical grip. You know, it's just the better option. If you do want to run a recoil mitigation, I highly suggest using the compensator. Just makes the recoil a little less bouncy, a little more predictable. As you can see, I don't know why it chose 2, you know, non-contrasting colors here, but the darker green is with compensator. You can see that it's much less bouncy. Onto the C8 SFW. This is Buck's gun. Recoil is pretty much vertical the whole way through. It has a base damage rating of 40. Personally, I put the extended barrel on it to get it to 44, again breaking that 42 damage threshold. If you do want to run recoil mitigation on it, run the flash hider. It's by far the best option. And look at it, it's completely controllable. Just run the extended. Okay, for Blackbeard's Mk17, I run a very shield supportive build on this one. As you can see, it does have that leftward pull, but again, its fire rate is so slow, you don't really have to worry about recoil at all. The extended barrel gets us up to 49 damage, which, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be enough to 3-shot every defender in the game, regardless of any kind of overhealth. This is only on Blackbeard, who is now a shield operator. I also run it with everything that his shield requires to be the safest possible. That being the iron sight and the laser for faster ADS time, and the angled grip, because whenever Blackbeard is reloading, his shield goes off to the side, which is extremely dangerous, so quicker the reload, the better. For the Para 308, first thing I'm going to mention even before we go into recoil, 52 damage. 2 shots, 1 speeds. 3 shots, absolutely everybody. Recoil is mostly vertical, so if you are looking for recoil mitigation, do run the extended barrel and the vertical grip. Personally, I run the angled grip because the animation for the reload is like really long, and I don't know why. I'll show you what I mean. It's just a tad long. And yes, obviously, consistency. If you want to be landing those body shots and just melting people with this thing, 100% go for it. I run the angled grip because I like having a fast reload. Moving on to Hibana's Type 89. As you can see, this thing has a pretty crazy rightward pull, even with the compensator, which I do have equipped right now. For example, if I put on the flash hider, it's kind of crazy. The reason I run the compensator over the flash hider, and you can see in these recoil patterns here, isn't because one goes further right than the other. It's actually because of these bounces here. You can see that it's pretty consistent, and then they have a bounce, consistent bounce, consistent bounce. Those bounces are going to throw you off. They've thrown me off many times. The compensator mitigates that just enough to be a little more consistent and a little more predictable. As you can see, I'm also running the angled grip simply due to the low magazine size on this weapon. You can run the vertical if you're not comfortable with the recoil, but personally I am, so that's why I'm running the angled. For Jackal's C7E, this thing is an absolute monster. As you can see, it does have a little bit of a bouncy recoil, but it's not enough to warrant using the compensator. I just use the vertical and the flash hider. Solid damage rating, solid fire rate. This is like the gold standard of ARs in the game. Just kit it out with consistency. On the other hand of that, we have the M762 or Zophia's AR. This thing has a very, very bouncy recoil. It doesn't look that bad on paper, but in practice, it's actually quite difficult to control. I'm not using the flash hider and the vertical grip to help support this weapon. I'm using it because it's a necessity. I'm surprised no one talks about this very often, but the V308 is actually one of the best ARs in the game. Statistically, this thing has practically no vertical recoil. It has amazing damage, magazine size of 51, and the only problem is it has a lower than average fire rate, but honestly, this thing cooks. So if it wasn't obvious, flash hider, vertical grip, let it cook. On the other side of that, we have the Spear 308, which has a much bouncier recoil pattern. It's really not like impossible to manage, but again, it does really need that recoil help. 42 damage, obviously it breaks that threshold, very good. Run the flash hider and the vertical grip so you actually can land those shots. However, I will mention this weapon is also on defense in the form of Thunderbird. Since Thunderbird doesn't have the added difficulty of having a magnified scope, I run the extended barrel to get it up to a little higher of a damage rating, While the 47 doesn't get us to 48, which is what we're aiming for, the 48 damage is really in an ideal scenario. There are things like limb and penetration damage reductions that go into all the calculations. So a little more consistency is going to help you in the long run in most of your fights. For the M4, once again, this is one of the gold standards of assault rifles. Personally, on Maverick, I'm running the vertical grip and the suppressor, just because Maverick's a little sneakier. But honestly, if you're running this on Striker, don't worry about the suppressor, just run the flash hider. Extremely consistent weapon, consistent recoil, consistent damage. Yeah, this thing's fantastic. The AK-74M was quite a toss-up for me, but I ended up landing with the flash hider. Looking at this recoil pattern, you might be surprised to hear that. If we compare that with the previous Type 89, it had those crazy bounces. This thing's rightward pull is actually quite consistent. While you can definitely run the compensator or the flash hider on this one, I just find that the recoil for both options is pretty minimal, and that extra flash on my screen just kind of throws me off a little. The ARX 200 is a very, very similar scenario. As you can see, it's got a little bit of a jumpy rightward pull. It's really a toss-up between the flash hider and the compensator. As you can see, this thing has those jumps to it. If you're going to be playing up close, use the compensator and the angled grip. If you're playing really far away, like you might be on Nomad, use the flash hider and the vertical grip. Moving on to the F90, this is actually my favorite AR in the game. As you can see, the vertical recoil is almost negligible, same with the horizontal. I personally do run the extended barrel on it because, again, it pushes it over that 42 damage threshold. Vertical grip because, I mean, you're on gridlock. If you do want to run recoil mitigation, the go-to is the flash hider, but I really do not think you need it. Onto the Commando 9, which, yes, is classified as a AR in the game, despite, I think, being chambered in 9mm. Don't ask. This thing's recoil pattern is a very literal laser beam. It just goes straight up. For its sake, if you're going to be kitting this out like an AR, I highly recommend using the extended barrel and the angled grip. Extended barrel gets us to 40 damage, which again, 3 shots, 76% of the roster. Although due to this thing's very laser beamy nature, I really don't think you need the vertical help. Use the angled or the horizontal, depending on what your playstyle is. I personally use the angled because, I mean, look how cool that is, come on. Okay, onto the SC-3000K, or Zero's AR. It's got a pretty bouncy recoil pattern, which might encourage you to use some of the recoil mitigation options. As you can see, I am using the vertical grip. However, for the muzzle attachments, the extended barrel is by far the best option. Gets us to 50 damage, which very, very few weapons can do. 50 damage, just like the Para 308, is going to ensure you're always 3-shotting defenders no matter what. If you do want to run recoil mitigation on this weapon, it really is a toss-up between the flash hider and the compensator. Personally, I choose flash hider for the simple fact of the flash being quite annoying. But by far, I will 100% suggest the extended barrel. That damage rating cannot be understated. Moving on to Senz's POF9. Recoil pattern is practically vertical. Really don't need either of the other grip options other than the vertical grip, so that's just the default. But its damage rating is a little low at a base of 35. So I personally put on the extended barrel, as 39 is going to ensure we're at least 3-shotting 76% of the roster in ideal scenarios. Very easily controllable. You don't really need the recoil mitigation. So I just double down on the body shot consistency. Alright, our final AR, the PCX-33 on Scopos. This one's also quite simple. Very consistent recoil pattern, little to no horizontal deviation. On Scopos, there's no real reason to use the angled grip. You could use the horizontal if you want to, just to get around faster, but then again, Scopos is an operator that can teleport from one side of the map to the other, so I don't really see any purpose there either. Definitely extended barrel, 40 damage, again, 76% of the roster, you get it. And that recoil is practically non-existent. Moving on to our roster of LMGs. The 6P41 is up first. Not going to do the entire magazine because that would take absolutely forever. As you can see, it actually has pretty reasonable recoil, comparable to some ARs in the game. It is important to note again that all LMGs in the game have a default debuff of minus 10% movement speed. So we're going to be using the horizontal grip as often as possible. Personally, on Fuse, I'm going to use the vertical and the flash hider. It's just the best option. However, if I am using this weapon on Finka, which I usually do, I do run the horizontal grip. As you can see, the recoil is not that much worse. And, I mean, that movement speed is pretty much the exact same as an AR now. Moving up next to the G8A1, I do run the compensator on this weapon. It does have a pretty crazy rightward pull near the end of the pattern. If we compare the compensator and the flash hider side by side, you can see that one gets really bouncy and one doesn't. Definitely run that compensator. Again, if you want the extra recoil mitigation, always run the vertical grip no matter what. But because this is an LMG and it's on two very, very fast playing operators in the game, that being IQ and Amaru, I do run the horizontal grip. Thing is still a monster, and it feels just like an AR. Similar scenario for the M249. Thing practically has zero vertical or horizontal recoil, especially with a fire rate as slow as it has. This is with the horizontal grip, I'll mind you. I really don't think you need the vertical on this. If you're going to be running this on an operator where you feel like you don't really need the movement speed, I totally understand that. But again, it's an LMG. It has that minus 10 debuff at default. Just run the horizontal. It's totally worth it. Ying's T95 is one of the only... Ying's T95 is actually the only automatic option she's ever had. So they basically created this thing as if it was an AR. And it pretty much functions as one. It has a lightning fast reload speed, a, amazing magazine size, really decent recoil, practically vertical recoil pattern. Again, but it's still an LMG. It has that debuff. I run the horizontal as the flash hider. As you can see, we don't really need the compensator. It's an absolute beast. The LMG-E still feels like it's reeling from the LMG rework or nerf. It really doesn't look that bad on paper, but in practice, this thing's recoil is really difficult to manage. Pulling down very, very hard. This is with the compensator and the vertical grip. I would not suggest using the horizontal on this LMG. It does really need the help. I highly suggest using the compensator so you don't have to, well, compensate. The ALDA is an interesting one because it doesn't actually have the option of having an angled grip, but as you can see, recoil pattern is practically vertical. No need for anything other than the flash hider. Since it is on Maestro, and Maestro is a 3 armor operator, so he's already slower than average, using an LMG, I do run the horizontal grip on it. It doesn't have the extra difficulty of having a magnified sight, so I think you do really need the movement speed on this one. Finally, in the LMG category, we have the M249 SAW, with a fantastic damage rating of 48. It's got a little bit of a leftward pull, but nothing too crazy. 3 armor operator, LMG, movement speed debuff. I'm just going to run the horizontal by default. If you do want to run the vertical, I totally get it. This thing's recoil does pull a lot left later on in the pattern, but I really don't think it's necessary, especially when you're competing with the F90, which is a very good AR. Moving on to our SMGs, starting with the FMG9. As you can see, this thing has practically no vertical recoil. If you're going to run this on smoke, or someone else I won't mention, if you're gonna run this on defense, I would highly recommend running the extended barrel, as it gets it up to that 38 damage threshold, which again, 76% of the roster, 2-shot, you know. If you're running this on Nook, I recommend you don't use the extended barrel. Honestly, try to hit headshots. I'd go for the compensator. Okay, moving on to the MP5K. Again, absolute laser beam recoil. You'll notice with a lot of these SMGs, they have damage ratings in the low 30s, the MP5K being 30 exactly. The extended barrel here isn't really going to help you out much. It only gives you 3 damage. For consistency's sake, it's not going to be helping you out very much at all. So I'm going to go for the flash hider. This thing pretty much feels like a headshot laser beam, so we're going to kit it out like that. The UMP45 is only available on Castle and Pulse. Castle gets magnified. He's a little jumpy on the side to side. Because extended barrel gets it to 42 damage, I always use it. But on Castle, I'm definitely using that vertical grip, just to make sure I'm hitting all my shots at longer ranges. However, if I am using this weapon on Pulse, I'm still running the extended barrel. But I'm also going to be running the horizontal grip just to make him a little faster. And, you know, Pulse can be speedy. If you're going to be running to nitro someone from below, maybe that horizontal grip will give you the extra hand. All right, for the P90. This is with the compensator, as you can see, almost perfectly vertical recoil. This thing is a headshot machine if you put the compensator on it. You can definitely use the flash hider, but you'll notice that later half of your spray gets a little wonky there. And then you try to shoot, and those first few rounds feel very, very solid, but then it starts getting quite bouncy. And it's harder to consistently hit your shots. I highly recommend using the compensator. Mostly for the P90, I highly recommend you actually try this weapon out instead of the MP5. Speaking of the MP5, both on Dock and Rook, I use the flash hider and the vertical grip, just because it makes it a little more consistent at range, especially with the ACOG being present on them. However, if we're going to talk about Melusi, who does not have the ACOG, I highly recommend using the compensator. Without the ACOG, the vertical recoil is really negligible. Honestly, you could run an extended barrel or a suppressor on this, but again, it's not going to be really doing you any favors. On Melusi, you can definitely run the horizontal. As you see, without the magnified, it doesn't really need that recoil help. You can still very consistently get those headshots, and Melusi needs a little help in the movement speed category. The 9x19 VSN is another weapon that's spread out between multiple operators with different kits. For the one-time sights, like on Azami and on Capcan, as you can see, recoil pattern it's not that crazy. Very easy to hit your shots. I run the extended barrel and the vertical. Extended barrel gets it to 38 damage, which, as I've mentioned before, is very important. If you are going to be running this weapon on Tachanka, however, due to the added difficulty given by his magnified sight, I would run the compensator. As you can see, that recoil is quite bouncy. And the compensator just helps us narrow that out. It's a lot easier to hit headshots at range. The MP7 is a unique one, as it has one of the cleanest iron sights in the game, so obviously I'm going to be using those. Also, recoil, really negligible. This is the recoil pattern with the compensator on. Compensator is what you're going to be wanting to use. Both on Bandit and Zero, I use the compensator. On Fenrir, I do use the suppressor, as even when people are inside of your smokeless fender, they can still see those bullet indicators coming at you. So they might actually be able to guess where you're shooting them from and get a kill on you. Due to Fenrir's gadget, I would 100% run the suppressor on him, but the compensator on everyone else. Frost C1 is an interesting weapon that should honestly be at the bottom of the barrel in this game. It has very low damage and a very low fire rate for the average when it comes to SMGs. Really, with this gun, we want as much as we can to just boost it up. I use the extended barrel to get it to 40 damage, and I use the horizontal grip because the other two grips aren't really necessary, especially the vertical. Again, yeah. The MPX is an absolute laser beam. Vertical recoil, again, this is with the vertical grip and the compensator equipped. This thing is a headshot machine, as you can see. Both on Valkyrie and Tubarão, I run this loadout with the vertical grip and the compensator, but if you are going to end up using this on Warden, I highly suggest using the horizontal grip, as it's still the headshot machine you know it as. The Warden is a 3 armor, so he needs a little bit of a movement speed buff. The M12 is almost statistically the worst SMG in the game. It's got worse recoil than most SMGs, terrible fire rate, arguably decent damage at 44 with the extended barrel equipped, which is exactly what you want. You don't want to be using any other barrels on this gun. It doesn't need the recoil help. You're not going to be using the suppressor because you're going to be using your pistol for that on Cav. So yeah, just run the extended barrel on that one. The MP5 SD obviously gets the vertical grip. It has the suppressor on integrally, so you can't really choose any options there. This thing, for some reason, is like really bouncy in the recoil category, so yeah, for sure vertical, don't use any of the other options. The PDW-9 on both Jackal and Osa is actually a really consistent option. The recoil does get a little bouncy, so if you do want to run recoil mitigation, go for that compensator, but again, the extended barrel gets us up to 38 damage, which is going to be an absolute monster, especially on attack. The recoil does get a little bouncy, so if you don't want to end up running that extended barrel and run the compensator instead, that is 100% fine. It's really up to you. The Vector 45 is one weapon that, again, I kit out completely differently for both operators that have it. As you can see, the recoil pattern with the compensator is almost entirely vertical, so again, run the compensator. On Mira, I run the angled grip just because I know I don't need that extra recoil help when I'm using a 1x, or in this case, the iron sight, because I find it clean. However, on Goyo, because I do have the magnified sight equipped, I do also run that vertical grip. Just makes it a little easier to control. As I mentioned in the optics section, reducing your FOV, zooming in your screen, makes it a little harder to control the weapon. So yeah, you do need the vertical grip. The T5 SMG, again, very similar to the MPX and something else I mentioned. You know, nearly vertical recoil, run the compensator, run the vertical grip. Especially on Legion, someone who's going to be holding corners, you can definitely run the horizontal grip just to get around a little faster. It really doesn't affect your accuracy that much. There's nothing wrong with kitting this weapon out like a headshot machine because it is. Ah, the Scorpion Evo. What a strange weapon. As you can see, that leftward pull is pretty crazy, so we definitely want to be using the compensator and the vertical grip as well. There's really no compromising when it comes to this weapon. With that fire rate, you want to be hitting headshots, and that leftward pull is definitely going to throw you off, so do not equip the flash hider. The K1A is almost an exact clone of the PCX-33 that we mentioned earlier. Same damage value, very similar fire rates. A little worse recoil going off to the right, but it's not too jumpy. 100% because we get that 40 damage with the extended barrel, vertical grip extended. Similar to a lot of Defender SMGs, the Mx4 Storm is an absolute headshot demon. Nearly vertical recoil, so I'm running the vertical grip and the compensator. There's no real reason to run anything else on Alibi since the Mx4 Storm has 30 rounds in the mag. She's already a 3-speed. And the damage value is pretty negligible as is. With the extended barrel, it only goes up to 29, I believe, which is not going to win you any gunfights. Next up is the ALDA 3, which is honestly pretty boring. Arguably very vertical recoil pattern. I run the extended barrel again to get it over 40 damage. It's extremely consistent. Because it's only on Kaid, there is value in running the horizontal grip due to him being a 3 armor. I really don't think it's entirely necessary. Kaid is an anchor. You're not going to be running around with him a lot. I think you should just double down on the consistency, use the vertical grip. The P10 Roni is a very interesting weapon, not only because of its magazine size, its recoil pattern, and everything that pretty much goes into it. I'll show you exactly why I don't use the flash hider on this weapon. Hold on. That is exactly why I don't use the flash hider on this weapon. That leftward pull could pull you away from getting a clean headshot. Again, there's really not much vertical recoil on a weapon with only 16 rounds. Run that compensator, and due to it only having 16 rounds, I also run the angled grip. Again, not hard to get headshots with. But if you do end up missing, or you have more than one target to go after, it's very nice to have that increased reload speed. Finally, for the primary SMGs, we have the Uzi, which has a very long, complicated name that I'm not going to spell out for you. Its shot-by-shot recoil is definitely spacier than other SMGs, but due to its magazine size, low damage, I run this thing extremely aggressively. The extended barrel to get to 40 damage, and the angled grip so I can reload faster. You can definitely run this with longer range engagements in mind, which obviously you would run the vertical grip. Personally, I don't think the extended barrel is a compromise. If you want to run the vertical instead of the angled, that it's totally okay. Arguably the most important weapons to kit out in the game, the secondary SMGs, starting with the SMG-11. That recoil pattern's crazy. So this is me running the muzzle brake, and a lot of people will question why on, a weapon that fires this fast will you run a muzzle brake. The next best option will be the compensator, and I'll show you these two recoil patterns side by side. As you can see, the compensator is a little more consistent. First shot recoil really throws me off, personally. You're gonna find that when you're aiming at your target, if you're not prepared for that first shot recoil, it is going to knock you off your target. I just previously talked about the P10 Roni, in which I complained about the low magazine size and how that justified my use for the angled grip. The difference with the SMG-11 in almost every single scenario on every operator, like Smoke, Mute, Amaru, you're using this weapon as an alternative to a shotgun, a longer range alternative to a shotgun. So you really don't want to be missing any shots. Up close, I'm going to be using the shotgun. At range, I'm going to be using the SMG-11. I'm going to make sure I can hit my shots. Next up is the Bearing 9. This thing has some pretty crazy vertical recoil, as well as you can see that first shot recoil is also quite wide. I do mostly run the compensator on this weapon, as I find that with most operators, I'm using this as an up-close option. Personally, I run the compensator. It just makes it more consistent. The C75 is actually really funny because I know this gun gets called one of the worst guns in the game all the time, simply due to its iron sights. But at the end of the day, it has actually really good damage, really high fire rate, good magazine size, good recoil. If this weapon had a red dot sight on it, it would be the best secondary SMG in the entire game. I highly recommend you guys try this one out on every operator that has it. I don't run the suppressor or the laser on it, and I'll show you exactly why. Who complain about the iron sights often have the suppressor on, and you can see it makes it even harder to see your target. The little bit of space between the foresight and the rear sight is just completely gone with the suppressor equipped. Whereas without the suppressor, we just have a little bit more space. See, I can see the target of his face now. It's a fantastic SMG. It's only something I would really use up close, but it does shred. On the other hand, we have the SMG-12, which is pretty much the exact opposite. This thing has some insane recoil. We only get one option on this one. Well, we only get one recoil mitigation option on this one, being the grip slot. So obviously we're going to be running the vertical grip. This thing has a crazy rightward pull that you need to be able to compensate for. And really with this one, there's no helping you. Just spray in the general direction of someone's head and then hope that you hit it. The SP SMG-9 is one of the strangest secondary SMGs in the game. I'll show you exactly why. So you see that? Well, it has this massive recoil that goes to the right. Or does it? Or does it go to the right? Does it go to the left? I really don't know. And that's kind of the main problem with this gun. You can run all the other options like the muzzle brake and the flash hider, but really, because of the unpredictability of the latter half of that recoil pattern, the closer we can get that to the center, the better. Just makes it a little more predictable. So yes, 100% run the compensator. Finally, we have the Reaper Mk2. First of all, I can make a whole video about this gun. What is up with the model? Why is she holding it like this? Like up to her eye? She moves it away from her face to aim down sights. Anyway. Ubisoft. Who ever thought in their right mind you'd give this secondary SMG the lowest fire rate out of all of them, a worse than average damage rating, and a recoil pattern that looks like this? Regardless of this thing needing a crazy buff, and I'll probably have to reiterate on my list later, for sure the compensator is the only go-to on this one. As you can see, this is the recoil pattern with the compensator. I know. Anything to help you reduce that rightward pull is going to be a godsend. Moving on to the DMR category, you're going to see a lot of very similar responses here. Most of the DMRs in the game have a very low magazine size. And also, as you can see, I'm trying to click as fast as possible, very low recoil. For the 417, I am going to be running the muzzle brake and the angled grip. Angled grip for that low magazine size, and also, I don't really think it needs the vertical. If you feel it does, go ahead and use it. But yeah, that's my suggestion. Glaz's OTS-03 is a little different, mostly because it has... The recoil is quite jumpy on the first few shots. So personally, I'm running the vertical grip and the muzzle brake just to make it a little less jumpy, but Glaz is one of the only operators that perfectly synergizes with the suppressor option. If you are comfortable with getting away with the suppressor, and you can manage that jumpy recoil, by all means use it. For the CAMRS available on Buck and Brava, obviously Buck doesn't get the option of having a grip, but on Brava... Oh god. I'm using the muzzle brake and the angled grip for the same reason I was running this on the 417. The SR25 is the first time I'm going to have a different loadout for each operator on the DMRs. As you can see with the SR25, its recoil is actually pretty bouncy horizontally. For this reason, even though it does share the same 20-round magazine size as the rest of the DMRs in the game, because of that exceptionally bouncy recoil, I do still run the vertical grip and the muzzle brake. If you are running this weapon on Blackbeard, however, I do recommend using the angled grip. It does happen to shred up close, but you want to make sure that your reload speed and ADS speed is as fast as possible, similar with his AR. The Mk14 EBR, again, very consistent, muzzle brake angled, shocking. Finally, for this category, we have the AR-1550, which, you know, has the lowest magazine size of any non-shotgun primary in the game. So I really do not think that the angled grip is a compromise on this one. I think you have to run it. Also because the recoil is nearly negligible. 67 damage to the body too is an absolutely crazy amount. Two-shot most defenders and attackers. And again, the recoil is nearly negligible. I run it this way on both Maverick and Tubarão. When it comes to the shotguns in the game, there are some that are always going to be better than others, but we're not talking about ranking what shotguns are best. We're talking about what attachments you should be running on each of them. If you can afford to run the iron sights or bear them, like here on the M590A1, I think it's good. Jesus. I actually got that right. Some of them have actually very, very good iron sights, like here on the Spaz 12. You should always use the iron sights, so just so you're aiming down sights as fast as possible. There are only a few shotguns in the game that have specific options other than the optic and the underbarrel, and I'm going to go through those now. Starting off with the SG-CQB, this weapon has the option of running a horizontal grip, which is actually perfect for a shotgun because, again, with shotguns, you're going to be trying to close that gap as quick as possible so that you can get as much damage as possible close to your target. It does have the option of using a vertical grip, but this is a shotgun, so you're either getting a 1 or 2 shot kill anyway. Your zeroing time is not going to matter. So use that horizontal grip to close that gap. The SG-12 is a very interesting shotgun, probably one of the worst in the game. That's the strategy with it. It does have the option of a vertical grip, which I highly recommend you do use. You can use the vertical or the horizontal. It really depends how you end up using this weapon. If you're intending to aim down sights for some reason, you should be using the vertical. If you intend to just run around corners and spray someone to death, which is personally what I do, you should use the horizontal. The other option this weapon has is the option for a barrel, the only one being the suppressor, and I really, really recommend you don't use this. If you're going to be up close and personal with your target, they're not going to have any time to hear you before they're dead anyway. If you are going to be holding a corner at close range, they might actually see your suppressor around the corner. I don't think it's worth running the suppressor. 12 is our next weapon, and just like the suppressor on the last one, it's not worth running, but that's a great thing on the FO12 because we have the extended barrel, which is obviously the choice we're going to go with. This thing is a monster up close. It's basically the exact same as the SASG-12, but or the sausage, but just better. Again, it is a toss-up between the horizontal grip and the vertical grip. You could run the horizontal grip just to get around a little faster, but this thing excels at just melting people up close, so I think the vertical grip is the better option. The BOSG has the lowest magazine size other than the GON 6 for any weapon in this game, and it's a one-shot kill, close to medium range. For this reason, I don't really see any purpose in using the vertical grip on it, because you're not going to be helping your recoil in a one-shot kill weapon. What you should be trying to help due to that 2-round magazine size is the reload speed, which, as you can see, is quite a bit faster. Especially if you miss your first shot and you're trying to take your second, and maybe there's another person coming, it just makes it a lot more consistent, a lot more reliable when facing more than one target. Next up, we have the ACS-12, which is practically an automatic DMR on defense. We're going to be using the vertical grip just to make sure that you're hitting all of the body shots that you need to, because you do need to. There's no reason for the angled grip. It has 30 rounds. The only place I would suggest using the horizontal grip is on Maestro because he is slower. The TC-SG-12 is pretty much a DMR in defense. I run this weapon in 2 very different ways. I'm gonna test this just like I did test the DMRs. Hold on. It has a lot of recoil, more than any DMR in the game, and it has this giant suppressor on the front, which is where the distinction between the 2 operators, Kaid and Goyo, and how I kit their weapons out, changes. Kaid is a heavy dude. He's going to be sitting at very far parts of the map. This thing has an ACOG, so I use it on Kaid. Same with the vertical grip, just helps with those successive shots. However, on Goyo, I do run this weapon completely differently. I am a very aggressive Goyo player, so I actually run the horizontal grip and a 1x, so that I can kind of use it like a shotgun. I can swing corners really close, spam people down at close range, and due to its magazine size, you can either use the angled grip or the horizontal. I just prefer the horizontal. Our secondary shotguns all follow the same rules as our primary shotguns, that being the laser sight and whatever 1x you find great. These things are not intended to be secondary weapons. They're intended to be tools for utility. Just, if you're going to kit them out like a primary shotgun, there's not many options anyway, so same thing. Pistols in the game are mostly safe to run with the laser sight and the muzzle brake, as typically these aren't your primary options. Having that really quick ADS speed and the really quick zeroing speed is going to be the best possible option, just in case you run out of ammo on your primary gun and have to very quickly switch and aim down sights with your secondary. However, there are a few operators in the game where the secondary weapon is more than just a panic weapon. Our first example of that is IQ, as when she pulls out her gadget, I can't do it in the shooting range. When she pulls out her gadget, you can only use your pistol. This is important because typically when we do have her gadget out, we're not using her pistol as a weapon, but a utility clearing tool. IQ is great at seeing gadgets through soft surfaces, and if we have the suppressor on, we can shoot those gadgets through soft surfaces without revealing our exact location. Next up, we have Caveira, who only has the option of putting on a laser sight on her weapon, and I feel like it goes without saying, but Caveira is very sneaky. Laser sight isn't going to do much for you when your ADS speed is also extremely fast. It's just going to give out your position. Don't run the laser sight. Don't give out your position. Same thing goes for Deimos. Again, very quick ADS speed. You don't need the laser. And when you're using your death mark, you can only have his magnum out. So I don't suggest giving away your position. I literally just recorded this bit. My dumbass didn't have my microphone on. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you all for coming and watching. If you made it this far, I'm honestly impressed. That was a long one. Probably the longest I've ever uploaded. Anyway, yeah, thanks. If you want to help me out, easiest thing you can do is subscribe, like, comment, just any kind of engagement. Best thing, share this with your friends if you want to rank up out of copper. It might help, just, putting it out there. Support the YouTube. It's important to me that I can do all this stuff, like create a giant list of my favorite attachments on every weapon, and not just have it sitting around in a, a box somewhere. I can actually share it with people, whether or not this channel blows up or not. It's just fun thing for me to do, and it's helpful for my mental health or something like that. So anyway, I'll see you guys on the flip side, I think is what I used to say. And thank you again. Hope you have a great day.